Over the course of 26 years, Manchester United won 38 trophies, as Sir Alex Ferguson built the greatest dynasty English football has ever seen. But how on earth did he do it? How did this man build super team after super team and keep reinventing himself to destroy every new challenge that came his way? This is the story of how Manchester United broke football for 26 years straight.
Can you believe it? The most dramatic finale!
Sir Alex Ferguson, he never gets tired of winning.
On the 6th of November 1986, Alex Ferguson was appointed manager of Manchester United as this insane story was about to kick off. But before we get to this season, it's important to understand the context of the club at the time, because Manchester United was struggling badly both on and off the pitch. They hadn't won a league title in almost 20 years, and their last major title was the European Cup all the way back in 1968 under the guidance of the legendary Sir Matt Busby. Every manager who followed had to face the huge expectations, but none could live up to them as they all crumbled under the pressure. Very similar to what is going on today. During the 70s, Manchester United then entered one of their darkest periods as they were relegated to the second division. And to make matters even worse, at this point, Liverpool were entering the most successful period in their club's history, winning title after title, both domestically and in Europe, picking up 11 league titles, 19 domestic cups, and 7 European trophies in just 20 years. Meanwhile, Manchester United lifted only 3 domestic cups in that same period. In the few seasons before Ferguson arrived, Manchester United actually had built a team with promise, but they lacked discipline, as there was a strong drinking culture going on inside the club. And after a very poor start to the 86-87 season, where Manchester United found themselves sitting just one spot from the bottom, they called in Alex Ferguson to steady the ship. But why him? Well, Ferguson had already been a top-flight manager for over a decade, having began his managerial career in 1974 at 32 years old by taking charge of St Mirren in the Scottish Second Division. After spending 4 years there and managing to get them promoted, he took charge of Aberdeen, where he was able to do the impossible in Scotland as his side toppled the Rangers and Celtic domination, becoming the first club to win the league besides those two in over 15 years. Even more impressively than that, he took Aberdeen to European glory, lifting the Cup Winners' Cup in 1983, defeating Bayern Munich along the way, and Real Madrid in the final. After this, Ferguson became a manager in demand, with both Arsenal and Spurs offering him a deal, but he had his eyes set on the Scotland national team. After 1 year in charge with Scotland and failing to qualify for the World Cup, Ferguson left his post there, and at the same time, Manchester United had sacked their manager. So, in November 1986, as they sat 21st in the English First Division, Ferguson was appointed the newest manager of Manchester United Football Club. So now, the scene is set. A 44-year-old Ferguson with fiery self-belief who was looking to start a revolution in England and bring glory back to Manchester. But this would be no easy task, and Ferguson's early years in Manchester would end up being the toughest of his entire career. When Ferguson arrived, the club had a bit of a culture shock. The stars in the team, such as Norman Whiteside, Paul McGrath, and Brian Robson, were used to a relaxed lifestyle where physical fitness took second priority and drinking and partying was a core part of their life. But this was not going to fly under Ferguson, as on day one, he sought to destroy this mentality. He believed in the importance of being professional both on and off the pitch, keeping fit and getting the edge in every way possible by consistently improving. Thanks to this mentality, Ferguson managed to lift United out of the relegation zone and finish the season in 11th place, which was respectable considering the position he started in. Now moving into his second season and his first full one in charge, Ferguson made several key signings in Steve Bruce, Viv Anderson, and Brian McClare, who helped United finish second place in the league, 9 points off first place Liverpool. This season also saw Brian McClare score 20 league goals, which made him the first United player to do that since George Best almost 20 years before. But just as things were starting to look positive for United, they would take a turn for the worse as they fell back into 11th place in Fergie's third season, despite signing Mark Hughes for a club record fee that season. By this point, Ferguson still hadn't managed to kill this drinking culture in the club, so it meant he had to be ruthless by getting rid of 2 key players in Norman Whiteside and Paul McGrath. This ruthless attitude Ferguson showed to players is something that is a constant throughout his career and something we'll be seeing a lot more of soon. But now, moving on into the 89-90 season, Ferguson made even further additions to the squad with Neil Webb, Mike Phelan, Paul Ince, and Gary Pallister all joining the team. But despite these additions, this season did not start well, with Manchester United getting humiliated by Man City 5-1 in what Ferguson describes as the lowest point of his entire career. The fans were starting to turn on him too, with banners being held out at games reading, 3 years of excuses and it's still crap, ta-ra Fergie. Both fans and journalists alike were calling for him to be sacked as things just kept getting worse. After going 7 games without a victory, United played an FA Cup third-round match against Nottingham Forest in a game that quite literally decided Fergie's future. It was understood that if he lost this game, he was getting the sack, but United walked away with a 1-0 victory thanks to a Mark Robins goal, and this is the game which is seen as the turning point in this story, as Manchester United went on to the final of the FA Cup, where Fergie's men defeated Crystal Palace 1-0 to land Ferguson his first major trophy as Manchester United manager. The following season saw a better domestic performance, finishing 6th place, but they rode the momentum of the FA Cup victory into Europe as they played in the European Cup Winners' Cup and made it to the final to play against Barcelona. But this was no regular Barcelona side, as it was Cruyff's so-called dream team. But still, Ferguson managed to get his men over the line as they won the final 2-1, handing United their first European trophy in over 20 years. Fergie was starting to win over all the doubters as there was hope brewing in Manchester, and he even went as far to claim that this team were ready to win the league title in the next season. This season also saw a 17-year-old Ryan Giggs make his debut for United, as he would soon become the most exciting talent in English football, making him the first of many young players Sir Alex Ferguson would introduce into the team, who would in turn propel him to glory. But for now, entering the 91-92 season, this was Ferguson's 6th season in charge, and he began by making 2 key signings in defender Paul Parker and the one and only Peter Schmeichel in goal. And these men would help Fergie take United to the 3rd season in a row lifting silverware, as United lifted the League Cup and the European Super Cup, but they still lost the league, and this time coming 2nd place to Leeds United, who had signed a Frenchman named Eric Cantona mid-season to propel them to the title, winning it on the final day. It was clear this United team were getting closer. There was just something missing up front, as it was a clear lack of goals in the second half of the season that cost them the league title, something that Ferguson would be looking to change next year as he sought to bring in a man to lead the line. And little did he know that the man he was going to select would be the catalyst that would propel this side to the very top of English football, as Ferguson was about finished forging his first super team and his domestic domination was about to kick off. English football had just changed forever as the new Premier League was formed, which meant there was a blank canvas where legacies were waiting to be written, and Manchester United were eager to make history. But this was now Ferguson's 7th season in charge of United, and as it stood, the club had gone 25 years without a league title. Currently, the record for English football titles was held by Liverpool with 18, whilst Manchester United trailed far behind with 7. But I want you to remember this statistic. It'll be important later on in the story. This Liverpool team was coming to an end of an era though, as key players had left the club and their era of dominance was coming to an end. Entering this season, Ferguson knew he needed a striker and chased down both Alan Shearer and David Hirst, but couldn't get his hands on either of them, instead settling for Dion Dublin as his new striker. But after just 3 games into the season, he broke his leg, leaving him out for the entire year. United had begun this season slow, and by November, they were sitting in 10th place as it looked like they'd be missing out on the league title yet again. But this is when something happened that would change the club's history forever, as Ferguson signed Eric Cantona from Leeds for a fee of £1.2 million. He was handed the number 7 jersey, and Ferguson finally had the missing piece to the puzzle. Cantona formed a strong striker partnership with Mark Hughes as they fixed United's goal issue for the previous season, but Cantona did more than just score goals. He inspired the team. He would ask Fergie to stay on to train extra, which prompted his teammates to do the same. He was an amazing player on the pitch, but an excellent character off it, which instilled hope in this team, and as the season progressed, they found themselves back in with a chance at the title. Come the 10th of April, Manchester United were in a 3-horse race with Aston Villa and Norwich, and it was a specific game against Sheffield Wednesday which decided everything, as United found themselves trailing with just 4 minutes left on the clock until Steve Bruce scored 2 late goals, the second being 7 minutes into stoppage time to give United the 3 points and propel them to the top of the league. This is where the famous Fergie time came about, and after this match, Manchester United would not lose that top position, as after a 26-year wait, Ferguson's men were crowned Premier League champions, writing their names in the history of English football. Ferguson had put some team together over recent years with the likes of Peter Schmeichel, Steve Bruce, Paul Ince, a 19-year-old wonder kid Ryan Giggs, and of course, King Eric Cantona. But they were not stopping here, as this was only just the start of their total English domination. In the following year, Manchester United brought a 22-year-old Roy Keane into the squad to replace the aging Brian Robson, and during this 93-94 season, they were completely dominant, leading the league from practically start to finish, picking up a second title in a row. But even more than that, they lifted an FA Cup too, smashing Chelsea 4-0 in the final to make it a domestic double. Ryan Giggs was also developing fast, as by this point he was no longer just a wonder kid, but he was the star of the team. And of course, King Cantona proved yet again why he deserved that iconic number 7 shirt, as he scored 25 goals in the season. But just as things were going great for both Cantona and United, the 94-95 season would prove difficult, as this season was marked with a kung fu kick into the crowd in January, resulting in an 8-month ban from English football. The media was calling for Cantona's head after this, and this is when Fergie had a choice to make: leave Eric out to dry or stick by his man. And of course, Fergie stuck by him, as he loved Cantona and refused to throw him under the bus. This man management from Ferguson was something that he was the best in the world at. He knew exactly how to manage his players to get the best out of them on an individual level, and he knew that when Cantona would return, he would come back as good as ever. But for now, Man United were in a title race with Blackburn Rovers, whilst they were missing their main man. They signed the previous season's top scorer, Andy Cole, in the January transfer window, and he was able to help keep them afloat until the final game of the season, where Man United drew to West Ham, handing the title to Blackburn. But to make matters worse, a week later, they played the FA Cup final against Everton, where they were also beat, meaning Fergie's men ended this season trophyless. Despite this heartache, Ferguson had been planting seeds all year that were ready to sprout, as he had been integrating a group of young players into the side known as the Class of '92. Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, Phil Neville, Nicky Butt, and David Beckham all made up this group of players, and rolling into the next season, Ferguson had a plan for these boys, but as usual, it was one that everyone would doubt.
The trick is always buy when you're strong, so he needs to buy players. You can't win anything with kids.
These comments were made by Liverpool legend Alan Hansen following United's opening day defeat to Aston Villa. But why was he saying this? Well, over the summer, Fergie had sold 3 major stars in Paul Ince, Mark Hughes, and Andrew Kanchelskis, but instead of replacing these with new signings, he decided to put his faith in youth, just like Sir Matt Busby had done over 30 years prior. This was part of Manchester United's DNA, but still, it was a major risk. Following this opening day defeat, Man United went on to win 5 in a row, and the side received an even bigger boost as Cantona returned in October to face Liverpool. United trailed the league all season, but with Cantona back in the squad, he led this team to the top of the Premier League yet again, as Newcastle United finished in second place. A week later, United played the FA Cup final against Liverpool, where of course Cantona scored the decisive goal to make it another double for Manchester United, and this meant that, contrary to Alan Hansen's beliefs, Manchester United did in fact win everything with kids, and these kids were only just getting better. At 21 years old, David Beckham opened the 96-97 season with a halfway line goal, which was the start of superstardom for the young winger. Beckham would only grow better from here, as he was quickly showing the world what he could do on that right wing with cross after cross, corner after corner, and free kick after free kick, all resulting in the same outcome: goals for Manchester United. At the start of this season, Ferguson also bolstered the squad, adding Ronnie Johnson and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and all this did was strengthen the already dominant team, meaning yet again they were crowned Premier League champions for the 4th time in 5 seasons, and they also made it to the European Cup semi-final, which was their best attempt in over 26 years, showing clear signs of growth. But Despite all this season ended with worry in Manchester for two different reasons. Firstly, Eric Cantona announced that he would be retiring from football at just 30 years of age, as he felt he was being exploited by Manchester United's merchandising department. And secondly, there was a new manager in the Premier League taking charge of Arsenal Football Club who was about to take the league by storm, as Ferguson's Manchester United were about to enter a completely new era and would go from the high of this season to the lows of defeat, but then to the pinnacle of European football. After Cantona left United, Ferguson had some holes to fill, so he signed a replacement striker in Teddy Sheringham to make up for the goals they were losing with Eric. He handed the number 7 jersey to David Beckham, solidifying his place as the star in the team, and gave the captain's armband to Roy Keane, as he stated he had all the right ingredients to succeed from the Frenchman. Interestingly, at this point, Keane and Beckham were the two men Ferguson placed such trust in, and they are two men whom he would fall out with so badly as the years would go by. For now though, United were on a 7-month unbeaten run, which was ended by Leeds United in September 1997, but this match saw an even bigger blow as newly appointed captain Roy Keane suffered a season-ending injury at the hands of Alfie Inge Haaland. Yes, Erling Haaland's father. Despite the loss of their captain, Man United marched into the new year sitting 11 points above second-place Arsenal, but as the year turned, Arsène Wenger's side won every single game until May 3rd when they defeated Everton, naming Arsenal Premier League champions, meaning Ferguson's men tasted the rare and bitter feeling of defeat. I think it's good for my young players to lose on this occasion. I wholeheartedly acknowledge what Arsenal achieved between Christmas and the end of the season. These are the words Ferguson spoke after this season, and within just 1 year, he'd be proven right. His players were angry. He was angry. There was a new team in town that were taking all the headlines, playing a more attractive style of football, but this was exactly what this team needed. It created a siege mentality in the squad, and this is what propelled them to achieve immortality in the very next season.
Beckham into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
1988-1999. What a season. So let's start from the beginning. Ferguson made two marquee signings this year in defender Jaap Stam and striker Dwight York, who was signed just minutes before the deadline to submit the squads for that year's Champions League. With these two additions to the squad, Ferguson had pretty much a perfect team. Every position had a specialist, and there was such a synergy within this squad. Schmeichel was the heroic goalkeeper in net, Jaap Stam and Ronnie Johnson marshaled the defense as the center-back pairing, Dennis Irwin played as the left back, and Gary Neville as the right back. The midfield two consisted of Roy Keane as the box-to-box destroyer and Paul Scholes as the deep-lying playmaker. On the left, there was Ryan Giggs, whose explosive pace and dribbling ability would cause major problems to defenders. On the right, there was the magnificent David Beckham, who was reaching the peak of his powers as everything he would touch would turn to gold. And then finally, York and Cole made up the deadliest striker partnership in all of Europe, as together they caused nightmares for opposing defenses with their telepathic relationship. This was Fergie's go-to starting lineup, but when he needed to rotate, he definitely had the players for it, with the likes of Solskjaer, Sheringham, Blomqvist, Brown, Butt, and Neville all rotating in and out of the team. Ferguson had crafted a super team, but despite that, the season did not start well with an opening 3-0 defeat to Arsenal in the Charity Shield. This season would also start in a scary manner in Europe, as Manchester United were drawn in the group of death, consisting of Barcelona and Bayern Munich. But with 4 draws and 2 wins, Man United managed to come second and progress to the knockout stages. Things also started shaking the FA Cup, where in just the 4th round they were drawn against Liverpool and were trailing all the way until the 86th minute, where thankfully they equalized, and then in stoppage time, Solskjaer cropped up and won the match, and this Fergie time winner would become the story of the entire season. As the league season progressed, United found themselves topping the table with Arsenal chasing, meaning the league would go down to the final day of the season, and in the end, Manchester United were crowned victors, topping the table by a single point, claiming their first trophy of the season. Now taking a look at the FA Cup, the semi-final was one of the most dramatic games of the year, as United played against Arsenal, where the game finished 0-0, meaning they would be decided in a replay match. And come this game, everything looked bleak for United, as Keane was sent off, and late into the match, Arsenal won a penalty, but a hero was born in Peter Schmeichel, as this penalty was saved. And then, come extra time, Ryan Giggs scored one of the greatest goals of his career, running the entire length of the pitch and putting the ball into the back of the net to send United to the final, where they defeated Newcastle United 2-0 to make it a domestic double yet again. But this season was different. Fergie's men were not only competing on the domestic level, but in Europe too, as they crafted one of football's greatest ever stories. They defeated Inter Milan 3-1 in the quarterfinals, meaning United faced off against Juventus in the penultimate round of the competition, and here's where things got dramatic. The first leg was played at Old Trafford, where Juventus scored early on, and then Ryan Giggs equalized in the 92nd minute, meaning it was all to play for come the second leg. But after just 11 minutes into the game, United found themselves down 2-0, and the European dream was looking bleak. But it's moments like this that make football legends, and it was the game where Roy Keane cemented his place in the Manchester United history books with a complete and total captain's performance to lead his team through. He scored a header from a David Beckham corner to give United hope and put an immaculate performance on the pitch, inspiring his team to victory with goals from York and Cole to finish the tie 4-3 to United. After the match, Ferguson had this to say about Roy Keane. "It was the most emphatic display of selflessness I have seen on a football field, pounding over every blade of grass, competing if he would rather die of exhaustion than lose. He inspired all around him. I felt it was an honor to be associated with such a player." During this game, though, Keane picked up a yellow card, which saw him out of the final, meaning United would have to march on without their captain. So now the scene was set. Manchester United marched to Barcelona to play the Champions League final for the first time in over 30 years. They had already won the Premier League and the FA Cup, meaning they were on the cusp of immortality. But the thing is, so were their opponents, as Bayern Munich were also on for the treble, so this game would be difficult to say the least. Within only 6 minutes, United conceded, and the score remained 1-0 throughout the entire match until the 91st minute. Right when this goal went in, Man United's assistant coach turned to Ferguson to start getting the team ready for extra time, and Ferguson simply replied with, "Steve, this game isn't finished."
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
Manchester United Football Club had just become immortal, and Ferguson had 3 words to sum this all up: football, bloody hell. After this night in Barcelona, the team returned to Manchester to a crowd of 500,000 fans to tour the city, and Alex Ferguson was now named Sir Alex Ferguson for achieving the impossible dream. But as much as you would expect this team to take their foot off the gas following a season like this, Sir Alex would not let them, as they were heading into the 99-2000 season hungrier than ever to fight for the lot once again. Following the treble, Peter Schmeichel left the club after 8 seasons, but would soon tarnish his United legacy by signing for Manchester City a couple years later. In the league, United were yet again able to fight off Wenger's Arsenal as they lifted a second Premier League title in a row with only 3 defeats in the entire season and a record margin of 18 points. Fergie's men also lifted the Intercontinental Cup in Tokyo, but unfortunately, they could not recreate their European success as they did in the previous season, getting knocked out of the Champions League by eventual winners Real Madrid in only the quarterfinals. Now, roll on to the 2000-2001 season, and Fergie made 2 key signings in Veron and Van Nistelrooy, and his men came back once more to lift a 3rd Premier League title in a row, becoming only the 4th team in English football history to do so. This season also saw Roy Keane get his revenge on Alfie Inge Haaland as they met for the first time since Keane's injury, and Keane quite literally ended Haaland's career on the spot with one of the most brutal tackles in football history, which sent the man into an early retirement. But as much as Manchester United were dominating this season, there were big doubts surrounding the club all year, as Sir Alex Ferguson had announced he'll be retiring from management following the season. He would eventually backtrack on his decision and choose to stay, but as he did this, problems were brewing in Manchester. His treble-winning side that was dominating football would soon start to fall apart. The Premier League would soon face new threats with newer challengers cropping up, and Sir Alex was about to go through one of the darkest periods in his United tenure, as he would have to completely rebuild this team, whilst the fan base would slowly start to turn on the man who had already given them so much success. The next 5 years in Manchester would prove difficult for Ferguson and his men. His treble team would slowly fall apart, but as you know, he would start building something great once again, as he would slowly start laying the foundations for his next super team. The 01-02 season started with Ferguson selling star defender Jaap Stam to Lazio, But looking back at this decision, Sir Alex describes it as the biggest mistake during his entire time at Manchester United. The team went through a poor first half of the season, and by December, they sat in 9th place in the Premier League. They were also knocked out early from the League Cup and the FA Cup, meaning that this season would prove to be a total failure, as Arsenal were eventually crowned Premier League champions. The shining light this season was the arrival of Ruud van Nistelrooy, who quickly announced himself as one of the best strikers in the Premier League, but still, the team underperformed on all fronts this year. Heading into the 02-03 season, Manchester United were still in search of that Jaap Stam replacement and decided to break the transfer record for a defender, signing Rio Ferdinand to the club for £29 million. But still, the team started the season poorly yet again. After this rough start, Ferguson was given a lot of criticism until he replied with one of his most iconic quotes, "I don't get paid to panic. We've had plenty of stuttering starts. My greatest challenge is not what's happening at the moment. My greatest challenge was knocking Liverpool right off their fucking perch, and you can print that." By the end of the season, Ferguson's men would in fact be sitting on top of the Premier League, meaning he was proven right. But as this season drew to a close, there was major controversy going on in the dressing room, specifically around the biggest star at the club, David Beckham. But what happened? Sir Alex had been growing increasingly weary of Beckham's superstar status, which meant tensions were already high between the two, but things reached their boiling point when Ferguson walked into the dressing room and kicked a boot out of anger. This boot went hurling into Beckham's face, cutting him, and despite this being an accident, it hit the media headlines, and the next thing you know, Beckham was being sold to Real Madrid after spending his entire life at Manchester United and cementing his legacy as one of United's great number 7s. It's interesting to see how the number 7 at United has developed over the years. George Best, Brian Robson, Eric Cantona, and David Beckham all don the iconic jersey and all left everlasting legacies at the club, and now the number 7 jersey was yet again up for grabs, meaning a new legacy was left to be written. On the 12th of August 2003, Sir Alex Ferguson signed an 18-year-old Portuguese winger from Sporting Lisbon and saw something extremely special within the boy from the very start, so much so that he gave him the number 7 jersey on day one. But Ronaldo's early years at United would be raw. He would still have a lot of learning to do before he became the best player in the world, as he was all tricks and less end product at the moment. But entering the 03-04 season, Manchester United were now truly in a transitional period and in dire need of a rebuild, to the point that they would go the next 3 years in a row without a Premier League title. But these years would come with controversy and drama throughout. In December of this 03-04 season, Rio Ferdinand was handed an 8-month ban from football for missing a drug test. He took the test later that day and returned negative results, but regardless, they banned him for missing the original time slot. Without Ferdinand in the team, United fell from the top of the league to 3rd as Arsenal lifted the title, ending this year invincible, becoming the only Premier League team to ever do this. United did manage to lift the FA Cup, beating Millwall 3-0 in the final, but also got knocked out of the Champions League early as Mourinho's Porto knocked them out, as this was just a sign of what the Premier League was about to experience in the coming years. As the 04-05 season began, Mourinho joined Chelsea, and now the league was pretty much a 3-horse race: Wenger, Ferguson, and Mourinho. Sir Alex began the year off by signing an 18-year-old Wayne Rooney from Everton, as he was truly the most exciting young player in football at the time. Ronaldo was also growing more in this team by putting in more and more match-winning performances. But still, this team did not perform this year. They spent the majority of the season without the main man Van Nistelrooy due to injury, and they underperformed in all competitions, as Chelsea lifted the league title with record-breaking points, leaving United in 3rd place. Arsenal lifted the FA Cup, beating United in the final. A second-round exit from the Champions League and a semi-final exit from the League Cup meant they ended this season trophyless, whilst Mourinho and Wenger were the talk of Premier League football, something that Manchester United fans were definitely not happy about. Now roll on to the 05-06 season, and things did not get much better. The Glazers completed their takeover of Manchester United, as the club was now placed under corporate American ownership. And yet again this year, Manchester United failed to lift the Premier League title, making that only one in the last 5 seasons, and they also failed to qualify for the Champions League knockout rounds this year, which was just piling more and more pressure on the club. This season provided for more transition, as whilst people were losing hope in Fergie, he knew what he was building. In November, captain Roy Keane left the club after his contract ended and a falling out with the manager. But in the transfer window this year, Ferguson made 4 key signings that would propel him to glory in the coming years. These being Ji-sung Park, Edwin van der Sar, Patrice Evra, and Nemanja Vidic, as Sir Alex Ferguson was just putting the final pieces of the puzzle in place for yet another super team, as his Manchester United side were now finally ready to take back their rightful place as the best team in England and soon the best team in all of Europe. Following these recent years, Ferguson was now being doubted as he was being attacked on all fronts. Fans and media alike were turning their backs on him, with one particular headline reading, "Shredding his legacy at every turn." But little did they know that everything was about to change. As the 06-07 season began, Michael Carrick signed for Manchester United to take the place of Roy Keane, and by this point, the only 5 players remained in the squad from that treble-winning side, those being Neville, Giggs, Scholes, Solskjaer, and Brown, meaning the team rebuild was pretty much complete. This season, United set the pace early in the Premier League, and from the 10th match till the final game of the season, they remained top, which put an end to this new Jose era of dominance, preventing him from winning 3 in a row. Rooney and Ronaldo had grown into the deadliest attacking duo in world football, as Ronaldo had now become the standout player in the Premier League, becoming the only player to ever win the Young Player of the Year award and the Player of the Year award at the same time. The old boys like Scholes and Giggs were also integral this season, as they both received Player of the Year nominations too. But despite this league success, United fell short in the Champions League, getting knocked out in the semi-finals by AC Milan, and they also lost the FA Cup final to Chelsea. But within just one season, both of these 2 defeats would be rectified, as they would get revenge on Chelsea to lift an even bigger prize. Okay, now here we are. The 07-08 season and this Manchester United side were now better than ever before, and they were about to write history yet again. Ferguson opened up the season by signing 3 players in Nani, Anderson, and Tevez to finalize this super team, and it lined up in this general formation. Van der Sar and net, as Man United finally found their long-term Peter Schmeichel replacement. A completely dominant defensive duo with Rio Ferdinand as the ball player and Nemanja Vidic as the monster in the back. Patrice Evra on the left, Brown on the right, who filled in for the injured Gary Neville. Carrick and Scholes created a perfect midfield too. Giggs and Nani rotated in off the left, the magnificent Cristiano Ronaldo played off the right, and the front 2 consisted of Tevez and Rooney, who would often interchange with Ronaldo to create a liquid attacking unit. Okay, so that's the squad. Now let's talk about the football. United actually suffered their worst start to a Premier League season under Ferguson, as they drew their first 2 games and lost the third against Manchester City, and even their main man Ronaldo was slow to get going, not scoring his first Premier League goal until the 8th game of the season. But of course, United clicked into gear, and so did Ronaldo, as they started to score goals for fun. As the season progressed, the title race emerged between Man United, Arsenal, and Chelsea, but thanks to the sheer talent Man United had in their squad, they finished the league in first place, landing them their 2nd title in a row. Cristiano Ronaldo was named as the player of the season yet again, as he broke the Premier League goal-scoring record with 31 goals for the season. But a Premier League title for Manchester United isn't too crazy. But when we turn to Europe, then this story definitely gets taken to a whole new level. They topped their Champions League group with 5 wins and a draw as they went flying into the round of 16 to face Lyon. They played out the tie to a 2-1 victory and progressed to the quarterfinals, where they calmly moved past Roma, landing them a spot in the last 4. 0-0 away at the Camp Nou meant it was all to play for at Old Trafford, and Paul Scholes was the man to step up and score the only goal of the match to send Manchester United to the Champions League final against Chelsea. The match finished level at 1-1 thanks to a Ronaldo header, but as this game progressed to extra time and eventually penalties, things got very intense. Cristiano Ronaldo, the best player in the world, stepped up and missed, but the stars aligned for United when John Terry slipped, hitting the post with his penalty. United then took charge of the shootout, and Van der Sar became the savior as he saved the final penalty and granted Fergie his 2nd Champions League winner's medal. Cristiano Ronaldo finished the season with 42 goals in 49 appearances, which earned him the Ballon d'Or, officially naming him the best player in the world. But the problem here was that as much as he loved United and Fergie, he had dreams to play in Madrid, but thanks to some convincing, Ferguson got him to stay for one more year, where United were going to go for the lot once again, as this super team was not ready yet. Man United began the 08-09 season by signing Dimitar Berbatov to make their attacking unit even more complete, and this year Liverpool emerged as the title challengers, but nevertheless, United came out on top once again, finishing the season with 90 points, 4 clear of Liverpool, and now this title meant something extremely significant in English football, as it was United's 18th, meaning they now matched Liverpool's record of 18 titles, all within Fergie's tenure in charge. This season saw Nemanja Vidic win the Premier League Player of the Season award, which is a remarkable feat to do as a defender. But despite these achievements, the year ended bitter in Manchester, as they made it all the way to the Champions League final yet again, but this time Fergie's men were simply outclassed by Guardiola's Barcelona and, in particular, Lionel Messi, and this would be the final game Ronaldo would play for United, as shortly after this defeat, he was announced as the new world record signing for Real Madrid, as this Manchester United era was coming to an end, especially with new, noisy challengers cropping up in the Premier League. But Fergie was not done quite yet, as he, despite matching Liverpool's 18 titles, he still had to beat it and truly knock them off their perch, as he believed the job was not yet finished. Sir Alex Ferguson was now entering his 24th year as Manchester United manager, and with the recent departure of Ronaldo and Tevez, he was entering yet another era with this team, as he was still chasing down that 19th Premier League title to put Manchester United on the very top of English football history. But unfortunately, the 09-10 season would not be that year, as this Manchester United team were beaten to the title by a single point, and were also knocked out of the Champions League by Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals. Wayne Rooney was the main man at this point, picking up 34 goals for the season, with the second top scorer being Berbatov with only 12. But as much as this season ended trophyless, in the 2010-11 season, Ferguson would finally get his way as they stormed the league, going unbeaten all the way until February, and then sealing the league with a 9-point gap over second-place Chelsea, meaning Sir Alex Ferguson had officially knocked Liverpool right off their perch. Looking over to Europe, though, the season ended in déjà vu, as Manchester United reached the final and yet again were beaten by Barcelona, this time 3-1, as Sir Alex Ferguson had now lost his second final in 3 years. The goal threat had been much more spread this season, as United had 4 players all reach double figures for goals at Berbatov, Rooney, Hernandez, and Nani, and, yet again, Nemanja Vidic was named the Premier League Player of the Season, as he was such a rock at the back. Now at this point in time, Manchester had been a one-team city, with United dominating football over their rivals Manchester City, but over the past couple years, Man City had a takeover, and they had been slowly building a team to compete at the very top, and entering the 2011-12 season, they were finally ready to paint the city blue, as this would prove to be one of the most dramatic seasons in football history. Heading into this season, Edwin van der Sar, Gary Neville, and Paul Scholes all retired from professional football, leaving only Ryan Giggs remaining from the old guard, and this year was all about Manchester. Which Manchester? Well, that was decided in the dying moments of the season, because with only one game to play, Man United and Man City sat level on points, but City had a significantly better goal difference, meaning the title was in City's hands. Come full time, United did everything they could, as Rooney scored the only goal in a 1-0 victory over Sunderland, but when the whistle blew, Man City were still playing their match and trailing until Dzeko leveled it, and then, with just seconds left on the clock,
Balotelli! Aguero! Staggering!
Just like that, Ferguson lost the title to his City rivals, and what stung the most was that earlier in the season, Manchester United lost 6-1 to Manchester City, which swung the goal difference in Man City's favor and handed them the trophy in the end. Many believe that if he had won the title, he would have retired this season, but there was no way this man was going to go out like this, so he got his team ready for one last go to regain the Premier League and paint Manchester red once more, as he entered his final season in charge of Manchester United Football Club. Fergie knew that to go out with a bang, he needed one more star man to join the side, and who better than the current Premier League Golden Boot winner, Robin van Persie. and what a signing he was, as he scored 26 Premier League goals to win a second Golden Boot in a row and, of course, propel Manchester United to their 20th Premier League title. Ferguson also had to call on an old friend in Paul Scholes to come out of retirement this season in order to help the team in the back end, and this led to United confirming the league title with 4 games to spare, having led the league all the way from November till the very end. On the 19th of May, with the title already in hand, Sir Alex Ferguson walked out to his final ever match in charge of Manchester United as they played against West Brom, and this was played out to a 5-5 draw and a perfect thriller of a finale to what is one of the greatest stories in football history. 10 Community Shields, 4 League Cups, 5 FA Cups, 1 European Cup Winners' Cup, 2 Champions League trophies, 13 Premier League titles, and, most importantly of all, he knocked Liverpool right off their fucking perch. Sir Alex Ferguson, you legend.